BBOC Live, presented by BetMGM. This is the Week 6 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, are my co-hosts Collin Wilson and, of course, the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. We have a lot to get to today. We'll do 3 best bets. We'll also talk 2 marquee matchups, and we'll speak with the universally loved, respected, and admired Darren Ravel for a market report, and more importantly, to get his fade. Ravel, fingers crossed he is not on anything that we are on. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone to make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there, in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, this is presented by BetMGM, as I said earlier. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, before we get started here, let's take a quick look at the leaderboard. Last year, we were all up over 60%. I'm doing my job this year. Collin changed his underwear last week with a sweep, so he's on the come up. So I got to fire up Brett. Brett, did you change your underwear, change the hat? Did you do something different this week?
Cowboys, big win last night. I'm in second place, by the way. I don't think our graphics person knows how to list those, but big week this week.
Yeah, I guess Collin with the 3-0 gets moved up to the second slot here. A little disrespect to Brett, but Collin, how you feeling headed into this weekend?
I feel great. I mean, that was a brutal September of bad beats, and then 1 week that was just completely forgettable. Let's just freeze this 3-0. Let's keep it there because it's going to take me a whole month to get caught up to 500 and get caught up with you. So I'll get there.
At least today, you don't have to rely on Brett Bielema to do anything good or bad. All right, let's move on to our best bets where we can hopefully pick the winner and cover, unlike Illinois, who has not covered this year. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Arizona State plus, I think plus 3.5 is out there now. I think this is just a horrible spot for Colorado. It's a team that's just had to get up every single week for these huge events. I think it's smart what Deion was doing and, bringing a lot of attention to the program, but especially for a team that doesn't have depth, those kids getting up every week, especially after back-to-back games against ranked opponents. This is a super flat spot in Tempe. And Arizona State actually matches up pretty well because the strength of their defense is in their secondary, preventing pass explosives. And that's really the only thing Colorado does well. They can't run the ball, which is Arizona State's run defensive weakness. And they can't play defense against anyone. So they profile as just a terrible favorite as a team that can't run the ball, can't defend, in a bad spot. And these types of games are Arizona State's Super Bowl. Can't go to the postseason. Saw it against USC. I'm sure they want to pick off Colorado here. I think this is a good spot to back the Sun Devils in the desert. Forks up. Collin, where you headed?
I love that play. Got to love the Kenny Dillingham motivation that we can't go to a bowl. I'm going to move to a team that has not covered a spread yet this year. I'm going to take Georgia against Kentucky. Listen, this Kentucky offense is one-dimensional, and we saw it. It worked great last week. They just pounded the rock against Florida, but they're heavy in explosives on the ground. They are not a success rate team. They are not a methodical offense. They don't move the chains and rack up 12 plays in a drive. They are just all about the explosive run. Georgia can defend that. They're top 40 against explosive runs this year. They're top 10 in defensive quality drives. And I know everybody, including myself on the BBOC podcast, talks about how this defense has just been asleep in the first quarter. We'll see if that changes in this game. But bottom line is this is a defense that still is top 10 in defensive quality drives. They don't allow drives over 10 yards. Over 10 plays. They don't allow drives that go over 50 yards. They're really good still in finishing drives and keeping points off the board. They just need to wake up in the first quarter. That's been the only problem with Georgia. When you flip to the offensive side of the ball, I think Carson Beck, 7-2 TD to INT ratio. He has more big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. This Kentucky defense is outside the top 100 and creating pressures. That tells me Carson Beck is going to be able to throw to anybody he wants, and that includes Brock Bowers in a pinch. I think Georgia gets their first cover today. I just been completely overblown because they've been asleep in the first quarter this year.
Yeah, that's the biggest question here. Will they finally come out in the first quarter with a sense of urgency? I've just felt like there's been complacency across the program, which is, semi-understandable. Back-to-back national titles. You have a really easy schedule. It's almost like get us to the SEC championship, get us to the college football playoff. But I keep waiting just for that inspired effort. Didn't happen against South Carolina. Didn't happen last week at Auburn. Between the hedges at night against the undefeated Kentucky team that just dominated Florida, you would think this is the time where you would get Georgia's best effort from the opening kick. If not, major red flags, because eventually they're going to get picked off if they just keep coming out sleepy throughout the SEC schedule. Brett, where you headed?
Headed to Big 12 country. In the history of the Big 12, this is one of the games. UCF and Kansas, first ever meeting. I'm looking at over 64. I reported yesterday UCF quarterback John Rice Plumlee returns as a starter for the Knights, first time in 3 weeks. Kansas, meanwhile, Jason Bean makes the start for Kansas, although Jalen Daniels could be available. Check around game time, but Bean definitely makes a start. It doesn't matter to me. For UCF, Plumlee's return will be a big lift to that offense. And if UCF gets a lead, certainly after what happened last week, they will not slow down at all. UCF leads the Big 12 in yards per play. Kansas ranks 4th in yards per play. On the other side, UCF's defense has allowed an average of 40 points per game in Big 12 play, a little bit different than the American. And Kansas allowed nearly 700 yards to Texas last week. 2 good offenses, 2 not so good defenses. Give me over 64.
Yeah, Kansas should have a much easier time running that offense, regardless of quarterback, this week against the UCF defense compared to the Texas defense, which is a good segue into our first marquee matchup of the day. Let's talk a little Red River shootout, rivalry, showdown, whatever you want to call it, kicking in Dallas in a little over an hour. Oklahoma has continued to take money. This line, I think, got as high as 6.5. Ticked down to what, 4.5 now? Colin, do you see where it is right now?
Yeah, the 4.5 across the board. There's a couple 5s.
4.5, 5 now. So Oklahoma has taken some respected money in the market. I believe this is the first time these two teams will meet with undefeated records since 2011. Now that this line, I made it right around a touchdown. This line is headed down to territory where I would lean Texas. I also like the under, which I know, Colin, you'll talk about in a bit. I just think, look, there's still some questions on this Oklahoma offensive line, which I think Texas can take advantage of. We saw how their defensive front dominated a game at Alabama. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, I just think Texas has superior weapons on the outside that'll make a couple more plays. This should be a pretty close game. I'm sure Oklahoma is going to come out super motivated after that embarrassing loss last year. Game should play out much different than the 49-0 Texas win last year, which, Oklahoma was running a Wildcat high school offense with a backup quarterback. I think this will be a good game, but I think the Texas defensive front and their superior weapons on the outside are the difference. So give me Texas. 4.5 would lean that way. I think they get the job done, and I like the under as well a bit. Colin, what do you like here?
Yeah, razor thin margins going on here. This is a game that I power rate Texas -5. So, I mean, we're really splitting hairs here. When we did the podcast, 6.5, 6s were out there. Now we're crossing over into a neutral. And I don't expect this to sit on 5. I'm sure it'll bounce between 4.5 and 6 here as we get closer to kick. But I think it really depends on what number you're getting. I think at 4.5, I stopped buying. At 5, I'm still going in with Oklahoma here. They're being underrated on defense still. You see what they've done in their advanced numbers. I know the strength of schedule isn't as tough, but SMU has a really good offense, and they just completely stifled them for a number of quarters in that game. And I'll save the total here for a best bet coming up. But on the side, my last buy on Oklahoma would be at 5. Otherwise, I would wait and play it live to get a better number, maybe a TD if it shows up there. But this is a game where I think Oklahoma, their defense has really turned it around this year. Shout out to Danny Stutzman. He's a #1 rated linebacker in all of PFF. So I'm going to ride with the Sooners here at 5 or better. At 4.5, it would be a complete layoff.
Yeah, you could see some more movement before kick because we're sitting, in a fairly dead zone with a line at 5, right? So it's a little easier for the market to be moved. So, it feels like anytime it would get to 4, you'd get big buy orders on Texas. And then anytime it's at 6, it seems like there's some market desire for the Sooners. Brett, what do you see here?
I like Texas. This is only the 5th time in the past 20 years of the rivalry that Texas has been favored in this series. Oklahoma has been favored 15 of the last 20 years. But the previous 4 times Texas was a favorite, they won each time, including 3 lopsided wins, including obviously last year. Upsets usually are the norm in this series, but not today. Talking heads this morning are mentioning Oklahoma's so-called college football playoff chances. Give me a break. You can throw those in a deep fryer at the Texas State Fair. They're done after today. I think Texas might be the best team in the country, and I think they'll show it today. Hook 'em horns.
Yeah, you can't argue with the resume of Texas. There's a couple of the top teams who haven't really played anyone. We still have some questions, but Texas has the best win of any team in the country so far at Alabama. They also took care of a Kansas team, albeit with a backup quarterback, but a backup quarterback that's had success in the past, but they dispatched Kansas with ease. So their resume is super impressive. Winner of this game, pretty much you could shoe in to the Big 12 championship with the way that the Big 12 is playing out this year, with a lot of those teams in the second tier disappointing, including Kansas State.
Except West Virginia. West Virginia is a powerhouse.
After this game, there will be 2 undefeated teams in the Big 12. The winner of this game between Oklahoma and Texas and West Virginia. Who would have guessed? All right, let's move on to our second best bet of the day. I'm going to kick things off with another Pac-12 dog, another Pac-12 home dog. I'm going to go with Cal here. Anything over a touchdown is fine. I think this is a potential sleepy spot for Oregon State after their win over Utah. But more importantly, I just think this is a pretty good matchup for Cal. Their run defense is very strong this year. That's what you need against Oregon State. It's the foundation of their offense. Everything branches off from there. And I just haven't been that impressed with DJU when he's forced to drop back and throw the ball. It's a pretty good system for him, but I thought he would progress a little bit more than he has as a passer. So, Cal, they just thrive in these spots as an underdog. They ugly up the game. They prevent no explosive plays, and they're good against the run. If you look back historically, Justin Wilcox 21-7 against the spread as an underdog of 4 or more points, including 10-1 against the number at home. I think Cal will ugly this up. Oregon State could be a little sleepy, but this Cal team I think is still a little bit undervalued. I mean, look what they did at Washington, despite giving up 2 non-offensive touchdowns to start the game. They should have beat Auburn early in the season, if not for a 3rd and 17 conversion. They shut down that run game. And this is a team that just plays close games against top teams. Last year's team wasn't as good, and they played Washington, USC, UCLA, Notre Dame, all to 1 possession losses. I think this is close game, goes down to the wire. So give me the Cal Bears plus 7.5. Collin, where you headed for your second best bet?
It's sad that we don't have advanced analytics against the Oregon State tush push to see if Cal can defend that. They're going to run that, 50 times? I'm going to head back down to Dallas. We're going to go to the Cotton Bowl. I'm going to do the Oklahoma-Texas under here. We've seen some steam on that once it got up to 62, but we're going to stay with the under here because neither team is going to be successful in establishing the run. The opposing defenses have just been too good, and the offenses have not shown that they could do it. Now, Jonathan Brooks had a huge day against Kansas, but that was Kansas's defense. They're really bad at broken tackles and tackling, and just defense has been a problem for them as a whole, especially on the ground. So I don't expect any running to come out of both of these offense. That's going to lead them into passing and get into passing downs. And both these defenses are top 20 in defensive quality drives and hard stops. And a quality drive, I mentioned it before, it's just the ability to get down the field with long sustaining drives, 10-play drives, 50 yards, whatever. They're not going to get it out of against these two defenses. And when they get into passing downs, that's why I think it favors Oklahoma the most, but there's going to be some stops. There's going to be some punts. Go look at that SMU Oklahoma game log. There's like 7 punts in a row. That could happen here. And when you look at Quinn Ewers, I talked about this on the podcast. He has excelled in throwing against quarters coverage. He's not been very good against cover 1 and cover 3. Oklahoma runs cover 1, cover 3, 60% of the time in their coverage base. So I think there's going to be some problems throwing downfield here for Texas. I like the under in this game.
Yeah, I played this under small as well. I think that the Oklahoma defensive improvement is real, but the offense still has struggled at times. Yes, they beat a couple doormats and ran it up, But you mentioned that SMU game. The game was 14-11 midway through the fourth quarter before Oklahoma got 2 short field touchdowns to cover by the hook against Cincinnati. They won 20-6. The offense wasn't really humming against either. And this, by far, is the best defense that they will face. And that offensive line, they face Cincy without their best defensive player, too. That offensive line for Oklahoma, I think, is going to have problems against Texas. And Ewers could have some issues against the coverages that Oklahoma runs. So, I think this will be lower scoring. A little bit worried about the pace with Oklahoma, but I think the under is the player. So I completely agree there. Brett, where are you going for your second best bet?
USF against your good buddy Trent Dilfer. To me, this is pretty simple, perhaps too simple. UAB is allowing 43 points per game against FBS opponents. USF averaging 43 points per game in AAC play. The Blazers defense, they allow 5.5 yards per carry. That's second worst in the league. I look for USF's Byron Brown, the conference's leading running quarterback. He and the Bulls will take advantage of the Blazers defense, which ranks second worst overall defense, second worst in scoring defense. And on top of all that, the Blazers actually are in a schedule flat spot, coming off consecutive games against Georgia and defending champ Tulane. Now they've got to play USF. The Bulls have continued to go Golish with first-year coach Alex Golish. For the first time in show history, I am picking 2 teams with the same hand signal. Give me USF minus 3.5.
Can we cash a bet on Brett getting South Florida mentioned in some sort of content? He loves South.
That might have to be the new Arkansas cash ticket, because
as long as I can parlay it with Arkansas references, absolutely.
Yeah, Collin doesn't really want to bring up Arkansas this year, so we're not getting too many mentions. But Brett, going back to his roots with a wager on USF. All right, let's take a quick break in the action and talk with the universally loved and respected Darren Ravel, get his market report, and more importantly, his fade Ravel.
Thanks, Stuck. Let's get to the most bet games of the day. Not surprisingly, the Red River, whatever they call it, Oklahoma, Texas, number 1, Alabama, Texas A&M, and Kentucky, Georgia. Most bet teams, Texas, 5.5, Bama, 1, -1, and Kentucky, 14.5. And the most bet overs, Oklahoma, Texas at 60.5, LSU at Missouri, 65.5, and Maryland at Ohio State, 56.5. The most bet unders, Kentucky at Georgia, Notre Dame at Louisville, and Oregon State, which used to be an automatic over team with California. They are the 4th best FBS under team over the past 6 seasons. One more note on Alabama. You guys have talked about it plenty, but they are now 17-15 against the spread since 2021. Also just used to be automatic no matter what number you threw at them. So that's certainly interesting. I know you're waiting for my fade Ravel because you're going to try to fade it. So I'm sorry if this is not good to your ears, but I am just licking my chops over the fact that Georgia has played with fire week after week. And yes, they're number 1, and yes, they're 5-0. And I don't think that Kentucky's really that good. I don't think Vanderbilt, obviously, nor Florida is that good. But 14.5, once you cross me over 2 touchdowns, I'm going to take it. I'm taking Kentucky plus 14.5 today.
Well, I was disappointed in that. By the way, shout out to whoever in the comments said now time for a 15-minute break. I've whipped Ravel and the producers into shortening up that segment. No more 4-minute rambles. Nice and tidy there. The most important thing is getting his pick. I'm sure Collin was happy with it. Will Georgia get its first cover of the year? If you go based on Ravel's track record, it looks like it. Disappointing to me. I'll be down in the bars here in Lexington. It should be exciting, but it would be very Kentucky, right? 5-0 start, get the hype build up, get blown out. When's basketball start? That's usually how it goes. All right. So let's take a break in the act. Oh, let's move on. Let's move on to our marquee matchup number 2. And let's stay in the SEC and talk a little Alabama, Texas A&M. got a beautiful slate. I mean, the Christmas is in the air. You're going to have the Red River Rivalry shootout, whatever, at noon on the main TV, whatever else you're sweating elsewhere. Go roll right into CBS, 3:30 Eastern for Alabama, Texas A&M, and then into Georgia, Kentucky at night. But let's talk this matchup. Alabama under a field goal favorite all week. Texas A&M has taken money. Alabama got some buyback. This line has moved a bit. Under is also taken some money. I like A&M here. I make them a slight favorite. So getting the points here, and what I think will be a close, low-scoring game, is very enticing. And I think that the difference will be the Texas A&M front and ability to stop the run. And similar to Texas, Oklahoma, which I also expect to be a close game, you haven't really been able to say this with Alabama and their opponents in recent years, but it's Texas A&M that has the better weapons on the outside. They have the better receiving core. So I think that they're going to make more plays. That's ultimately going to be the difference. And Texas A&M has been excellent against the run this year with that front. Alabama's had offensive line issues, and you can't really trust Jalen Milroe to drop back and pick apart a defense consistently. He might hit a couple explosives. He has an excellent deep ball, but I don't think he's going to, sustain drives through the air down the field against this Texas A&M defense that should get a ton of pressure. Alabama's defense, top 5 unit in the country. They'll get some pressure too. Won't be easy for A&M, but I trust their talent on the outside to make a few more plays, throw in the 12th man and the home field advantage. And look, Alabama's struggled on the road over the past couple of years in true road games. I think they're 5-10 against the spread since 2019, 2-7 against ranked opponents. And they lost here when Texas A&M wasn't even ranked a couple of years back when they were 18-point favorites. I like A&M here. Collin, do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. I agree with all of the movement in the market. I'm with Texas A&M here, and I'll focus on one stat, and that is Texas A&M is number 1 in the country in defensive havoc. They are almost leading the nation in pass breakups, tackles for loss. They are in everybody's backfield, and that's going up against an Alabama offensive line and quarterback that is 111th in the nation in havoc allowed. They allow everybody to play in the backfield. There's too many mistakes that go on, and I think, like I said on our podcast earlier this week, you have to go back and look at what Texas did against Alabama. Sark only talked about maintaining pass rush integrity. If you maintain those lanes, you keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket and you can tackle him. Texas A&M has been excellent at not just producing a pass rush, but keeping quarterbacks in the pocket. Look at the dual threats that Texas A&M has gone against. Robbie Ashford at Auburn did nothing. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas did nothing. Jaya Wright at ULM had 34 yards rushing. That's the best dual threat quarterback performance against Texas A&M's defense. I have supreme confidence they're going to keep Jalen Milroe from leaving the pocket. Give me the Aggies.
Brett, clean sweep.
Yeah, look, Action Network's research guru, Evan Abrams, gave me this stat. With Alabama being a small favorite against unranked A&M, you have to go back to 2014, the last time Bama was less than a 10-point favorite against an unranked team. That was against Arkansas. There, you can cash that one, Collin. Last time Bama was less than a field goal favorite versus an unranked team, you have to go back to 2007. Stuckey, you were in grade school then, I think. Bama failed to cover both of those contests. One last stat. Jimbo Fisher turns 58 on Monday. Jimbo Fisher has never lost a game that's been played 2 days before his 58th birthday. Gig 'em Aggies.
Brett, with the hard-hitting analysis, with the birthday-related trends on Jimbo Fisher. Yeah, gig 'em. It's a clean sweep on A&M. All right, let's move on to our round-robin parlay. Collin, we want to hit 1, preferably 2 of these this season. Haven't got there yet, but what a time to have our first. It's really the first start of one of the best months of the entire sports betting season. You got a full college football slate, full NFL slate tomorrow starting at 9 in the morning. You got MLB playoffs. It's just a great time to be a sports fan and a sports bettor. So let's hit this one. You want to kick us off with an anchor?
Yeah, let's do UCLA here. They're short favorite at home, and that's Washington State is going to get out of Pullman, come down to LA. And UCLA is off of a bye after a brutal game against Utah and Utah's defense. Well, this is not the defense that Washington State has. I have been waiting for Cam Ward. I mean, he has been a turnover-worthy machine his entire career, hasn't had any this year. It's tied into Washington State's success. but this is the first real defense he's going to play that can defend the pass, defend the run, and get into the backfield. So I see some turnover-worthy plays coming for Cam Ward. And Wazoo is outside the top 100 in defensive finishing drives. Give me UCLA at home, off a bye, fresh and ready to create turnovers.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about the UCLA secondary. I know their numbers look decent, but like, who have they faced? And even against Utah, I mean, Utah's backup, they can't throw against anybody. But I think the UCLA offense will be the difference. This will be UCLA's in my personal round robin as well. So I agree here. Let's go good dual anchors. I'm going to throw another short favorite out and go with the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana. I think the Texas State love's gone a little too far. I think ULL gets this done. There's still just some consistency and efficiency issues with Texas State. Yeah, they have like these explosive halves, but then they have these halves where they just don't show up at all. I think they finally get bit today. And I think that just that win against Baylor has gone a little bit too far as their market rating. But Baylor hasn't been impressive. And that was the first game where they really surprised Baylor. Baylor had no idea really what to expect, similar to what we saw against TCU with Colorado. So let's go with the Ragin' Cajuns. Where are you going for the third leg?
Let's go to Columbia, Missouri. We're going to take Missouri here. LSU is dead last on so many defensive metrics, quality drives, finishing drives. The defense has been abominable, and they're going to go up against Luther Burden, who is the best wide receiver in college football right now. He's going to be in the slot for Missouri. He's going to draw Sage Ryan in coverage, who has allowed 11 of 14 catches. He's allowed explosives. He hasn't recorded a PBU. I expect Missouri's offense to hum here. So let's go ahead and take the Tigers to get it done outright.
I will. Yeah, Burden's been amazing. I'll throw out Arizona State. Let's throw Arizona State, and I already talked about that earlier. Finish us up.
Yeah, we're going to do Bowling Green here. Bowling Green dismantled Georgia Tech last week. And if you look at the way they did it Service Academy style. They had scoring drives of plays that were 10, 11, 10, 7, 10. They had a pick six. I mean, this play log I've read 100 times on Bowling Green. If they can dismantle Georgia Tech, they can certainly do it against Miami of Ohio today. Let's take them to round out our round robin.
Love it. All right, that'll do it for our round robin. We're going UCLA, Missouri, Bowling Green, Louisiana, and Arizona State. And before we close up shop, one final task. Let's get to our third best bet. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Texas A&M. I already talked about it in the breakdown of the marquee matchup. Let's take the 2.5 here. Gig 'em. Collin, what's your final best bet?
Yeah, I went group of 5 last week. Let's do it again. I'm going to do South Alabama -10. One with ULM last week in this spot. That's because App State is worse in the nation at defending the rush. That's not the case here with South Alabama. They are actually top 35 in defensive rushing success rate. You go to the other side of the ball, ULM's defense is dead last in FBS in passing success rate. They allow everybody to throw passes and get first downs. Quarterback Carter Bradley, he's had his highest passer rating of 2022 against this ULM defense. He threw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, no turnover-worthy plays. It's a very comfortable spot for South Alabama against a ULM team that just had a great fit against App State last week.
Yeah, it feels like a good time to buy the Jaguars. Brett, where are you going for the final best bet of the show?
Out west to the Mountain West, the peak of performance, as they say. Colorado State and Utah State. The Rams and Aggies have the top 2 offenses in the Mountain West. Only Nevada and Hawaii have worse defenses than the Rams and the Aggies. Colorado State wide receiver Torrey Horton, the nation's leader in receiving yards, will thrive against an Aggies defense. I started the show with an over. Let's end the show with an over. Give me Colorado State, Utah State over 62.5.
Brett on brand, closing the show with an over, and also went back to his roots with USF. Thanks, as always, to Collin and Brett for joining me. Thanks, of course, to the producers on the back end. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app where you can find all of our bets in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, we will have our recap show, BBOC podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget about the voicemail, 959-BAD-BEAT. It's always in my Twitter profile at Stuckey2. And we also have to remind you that this is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also, as I said before, make sure you download BBOC podcast. Listen, we will have multiple episodes throughout the week. We'll be back same time next week, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, Saturday for the Week 7 college football betting preview. Good luck on all of your wagers, and thanks again for tuning in. Cheers.